made it away from the slot machines and you're here. So today we're going to be talking a little bit about some of the uses of video that we've been trying out at the University of Michigan. And I'm here today with some of my colleagues, so Mary Tanny Muirhead from the University of Michigan, Megan Shaughnessy from the University of Michigan, and Adam Geller from Edthena. This presentation actually started after our presentation last year when we were walking out of the door. So last year we did a presentation where we talked about the process that it took us to become a program, a teacher education program, that used video more routinely, more robustly, and so on. And we detailed the very long process and the many mistakes we made in getting there. So if you're interested in that, that's our presentation from last year, and that's a little YouTube video of that presentation if you're interested in how we got to this point. So what we're talking about today is actually, now that we've sort of figured out what we want to be doing with video, what are we now doing moving forward? How are we seeing innovations? How are we trying to address problems of practice through new uses of video? So before I get too far into this, how many of you here are teaching courses to future teachers? How many of you have ever used Edthena? Okay. Were there other questions we wanted to know? I think those were the two big ones. Okay, so thank you, and we've introduced ourselves, so I'll just go ahead. So what we're going to do is I'm going to start off just talking a little bit about why I think video is vital for practice-based teacher education programs, and then we're going to hear a little bit from Adam. He's going to talk about the platform Edthena that we've been using in our teacher education program, and then after that, Mary and Megan are going to be sharing some examples of sort of juxtaposing past practice against some new innovations that we've been trying to address some problems that we were encountering. And then we'll summarize it at the end and hopefully have some time for questions. So a little bit of the framing about the work that we're doing here. So like your programs, I'm sure, we have goals that we have for our future teachers, things that we want them to know and to be able to do. So at the University of Michigan, we're really focused on these three big areas. So one is making sure that they're skilled with high leverage practices, practices that they'll need to use every day, practices that are crucial for success in teaching. We want them to really know about the subject matter and be able to teach it with integrity. And so that's a big focus of the work in our programs. And finally, we want to make sure that we're producing teachers who can act in light of professional ethics. And so these three are central to the whole redesign of our program and to the processes and innovations that you'll see today. These sort of look, in this list, they sort of look nice and bulleted, and one thing and it's separate from another thing and it's separate from another thing, but you know that in the work of teaching there is a need for integration and attention to these things in practice. So we often use this diagram when we're talking about and conceptualizing the work of teaching and how teaching involves teachers, and students, and content in interaction with each other to produce something called learning and engaging in things called teaching. And inside of that little diagram there you see all the arrows. So you see teachers working with students and teachers thinking about content and teachers, even that little arrow there that goes down from teachers to the arrow between students and the content. So as kids are studying content, how are teachers helping with that studying? So there's all this interaction and there's the use of those teaching practices and the content knowledge and the professional ethics, and those are all sort of influenced by the environment in which that teaching is happening. So this is our conception of the nature of teaching and what leads us to have particular pedagogies that we think are useful for preparing teachers who can do the work. And so Grossman and her colleagues did a study of many different professions, and they describe these pedagogies of practice. And they have three features of these pedagogies of practice that they put forward. One of them is to be able to represent the complex practice to the people who are learning it, to be able to unpack it, to do a decomposition of that practice into pieces that are learnable, that can be reintegrated. So it's not like it's very mechanical, but it is a way to make it manageable and learnable by taking it apart in that way. And to have contexts that allow a person new to the profession to be trying out these practices, not yet dealing with the full complexity of the situation, but working up to it over time. So the settings in which they are doing this work are very important as well. So in this context, when we're working on this complex act where there's an integration of practice and knowledge and attention to kids and the influence of and the environment, we think that video is an ideal medium for supporting learning inside of pedagogies of practice. So, for instance, videos can richly represent the practice. They allow us to decompose the practice, as was stated. But the thing that's important is video by itself may or may not be able to do those things, because what matters is what sort of environment or what sort of setup you have for being able to manage the use of that video. So video can do these things when the videos are accessible, when they're securely stored, when you're able to use them in flexible ways, so that you can store the videos, share the videos, and have robust interaction around those videos. And so over the years, our experimentation with different platforms for working with videos led us to be working with Athena and working with Adam and his team. And Adam's going to explain now the Edthena setup, and that'll be the context for the examples that Mary and Megan share in just a moment.
So it was interesting to me to see Tim's slides, having prepared my part of it separately, because it was cool how there was a lot of alignment between what I felt, what we've learned from talking to lots of programs, and what he felt that have turned out to be the kind of key things that help them be successful. So what I'm going to share today are really the three key problems that we find programs wrestling with, questions that they ask that we think we have good answers to, but questions that they ask and need to have good answers to in order to achieve their vision for how to use video within their program. So the first question is really around reliability of uploads and ensuring that the teachers at scale within your organization can get the videos online. Because quite honestly, it doesn't matter how great the tool set is for interacting with those videos if you can't get the videos online without it being a headache. So our solution to this problem is what we call the video tool, the Athena video tool. And this is something that's installable on your computer. It's Mac and PC. And it works with any camera that your candidates might be using. And essentially they are out in the field, they are recording video, and they bring it back to the computer, and these are just screenshots of course, but they're going to drag it in. And after a few seconds, they are presented with the opportunity to then trim the video, and they click the continue button. The compression and the upload is all automatic. Let me back this up so it doesn't just sound like cheerleading. Let me back it up with some stats. Across all of our users, across all of their videos, across videos that range from 90 seconds like the ones we'll hear about today to full hours of videos. Candidates and teachers and in-service teachers are getting videos online on the first attempt at a greater than 99% success rate. This is a game changer because your candidates will be able to get the video online. If you are a program that has initiatives around iOS technologies, we also have an iOS app as well. The second question that needs a really strong answer is how are the tools going to support authentic collaboration? As teachers, we are so used to a profession and a practice that is about being in person, and now we're saying we're going to coach you through this technology platform. So how is the technology going to still preserve the human element in that process? So our solution to that is what we call the video conversation page. This is, I like to say, the heart and soul of Edthena. And what we're looking at here is a screenshot of a video that's playing. The playhead is actually this plus sign here, so you can imagine that kind of traveling across the video as it's playing. And if this is where I wanted to leave my comment, I would just click with my mouse onto the plus sign, and I'd be presented with 4 options for leaving a comment: question, suggestion, strength, and note. So I could pick one of them, suggestion for this example, leave a comment right here, right in the moment in time. But we help take that one step further. Your program can be using the framework that you use to talk about good teaching and have that inside of our system. And now inside of this conversation, be linking up all the comments to the specific moments in time. So now those frameworks are not something you leave till the end. It's something you integrate throughout the conversation, reference as part of the talking about teaching. And when you click submit, everything instantly updates. So now a marker is on the timeline and the comment is down below. You'll notice even here in leaving the comments, we see the faces of the people. right? And right there below the comment, we can click reply. So it truly is about creating not just a way to leave the comments in an easy and streamlined way, but making sure that the people who are leaving these comments are front and present in this process. The last question that we think needs a good answer is, how are you going to manage the organization of an online video coaching process, and how are you going to actually have a process? The answer to this question from our perspective probably is way longer than would be appropriate for this context. So I have just a few kind of highlights here of ways that we've kind of tackled this. One way is something we call explorations. So this is a way to kind of design and manage learning experiences. Some of you might call this assignments, we call them explorations. So lots of different modes of learning that are possible inside of this. Other things that we are doing to help organizations, we have integrated with the Gates Foundation Measures of Effective Teaching video library. So if you're looking for examples of practice to start those conversations, you can actually now draw on this video library of 2,100 different video lessons. If your program is using EdTPA, we are integrated with the EdTPA process. Obviously, we have lots of video on our platform. That's our core competency. We can help your candidates put together an EdTPA portfolio. So now the program is the runway to that set of experiences at the end. And last, I want to mention, just actually showing this for the first time this week, we now have a tool for your candidates to build a video resume, right? So they have all this evidence of practice. Why don't they use some of that as they're applying for their jobs? So these are some of the ways that we've tried to come up with answers to those problems, the kind of 3 critical questions.
Okay, so we're going to turn now to sharing 3 examples of innovations that we've been developing in the context of our teacher education program. And we really do want to make the point here that it's possible that some of these innovations are things that others are using in the context of their own teacher education programs, but they have been things that we have been discovering that Edthena has been quite useful for us in terms of solving a number of challenges that come up in the context of doing work around video in our teacher education program. So one example of this, I teach math methods courses. One of the core teaching practices, high leverage teaching practices that we work on in our program is explaining core content. And we work on explaining core content as part of the math methods courses that I teach. I want to just start by giving you a sense of what we mean by that particular practice, and then I'm going to show you how our use of Edthena has been quite fundamental to how we're able to now really support our teaching interns' learning of this practice. So we think about explaining core content as being about giving all children access to fundamental ideas and practices in a given domain. So it's really about supporting all children's access to the particular content. It involves a number of different things by teachers. So teachers need to be able to attend to subject matter and students' likely interpretation of it when they're explaining core content. They need to be able to strategically use and choose representations that can support students' understanding of such content. It involves careful use of language. It involves being able to highlight core ideas while at the same time managing to move away from potentially distracting ones. So knowing which ideas to bring out and which ones to kind of put under the table for the moment. And still, quite crucially, a big part of the practice is about modeling one's own, making one's own thinking visible while modeling and explaining. So in this math methods course, one of our assignments for our teaching interns is to give an explanation about content to an elementary school student. In this particular assignment, we're working with 5th grade students. So this is a similar assignment, I'm sure, to things that many of you do in the context of your own teacher education programs. So for an example of this, we might ask one of our teacher candidates to work with a 5th grade student to try to explain how one could use an area model representation to solve a fraction multiplication problem. So thinking about this particular problem, Sammy is at her school's ice cream social, and she's feeling the need for some chocolate. Sammy decides to buy 3/5 of a pan of brownies that is 2/3 full. Sammy wants to know how much of a total pan of brownies she will be buying. She wonders, what is 3/5 of 2/3? Okay. So the task for our teaching interns is to explain to children how you could use an area model representation to solve this particular fraction multiplication problem with a longer term goal of moving children toward a standard algorithm. So several years ago, this is what I used to do in the context of teaching my course. I would have to do some work with my teaching interns in order to make sure they were ready to go off and work with children, because it's a pretty high stakes situation to go out into the field and to be explaining this content to actual children. It's high stakes both for the children, and it's high stakes also for the teaching interns, who really need to have a successful experience when they go off and do this particular kind of work. So what I used to have my teaching interns do is I would have them write up sometimes quite long descriptions of what they plan to go off and do with children. This is a quite long description that actually went on to an additional page. Not all of my teaching interns wrote this much text. But what I really want to highlight here is that this was lengthy text. It took my teaching interns a long time to write the text. They sometimes included things like draw a model while explaining. And by model, they mean the area model representation. I didn't really have a good sense as a teacher educator of what they planned to do as they constructed that model, or how they were going to be integrating the drawing of that model with what they were saying, what they were writing to me that they were going to say to the student. So it was a real challenge. Then I, as a teacher educator, would go through all of these lesson plans. I would read everything, and then I would put comments in the document. So the blue here represents the comments that I put in this particular lesson plan. And then I'd send the file back to my teaching intern and say, think about these comments, revise your work, and be ready on Tuesday to come in and work with an actual 5th grade student. Took a lot of time. So time consuming for interns. One question it raised is, was it actually a very good use of time for my teaching interns, because they were spending a lot of time thinking about how they were going to represent this in writing for me, their course instructor, which isn't quite the same as the work you go off when you actually go explain that to children, right? And then it was pretty limited for evaluating their preparation and for providing their feedback, because I wasn't able to see large parts of the practice in their written representations of it. So a couple of years ago, we decided to try using Edthena as part of this preparation for this particular assignment. I'm going to show you right now what that actually looked like. So what we had all of our teaching interns do, they have cameras, is we said, okay, as part of your preparation for this particular work, I want you to video record yourself giving that explanation. You can do it in your dorm room, you can do it in the library, you can do it in your field placement classroom. Just video record yourself giving that particular explanation, instead of writing up a lengthy lesson plan for it. And then I want you to upload that video into Athena. I'll watch it, I'll give you comments on it, and you can think about those comments before you actually go off and do the work with children. So here's an example of what one of our teaching interns did. And I want to show you what it looks like to actually, as a teacher educator, be stopping and providing some comments on someone's practice in the moment.
To start understanding how to multiply fractions, let's first look at a problem you're familiar with, but with different numbers. So Sammy's at her school's ice cream social, and she's feeling the need for some chocolate. Sammy decides to buy 1/2 of a pan of brownies that is 1/2 full.
Okay, so right here, I'm going to leave a comment right now, because I've noticed that this particular teaching intern has changed the problem. And she's changed the problem to be 1/2 times 1/2, which is going to create some complexity for trying to explain this content to children. So I'll click on the suggestions button here. And I'm going to just leave a comment like, reconsider the fractions that you are using, because 1/2 times 1/2 is challenging. As an example, you want to fraction okay, so in case you can't read that, it says reconsider the fractions that you're using, because 1/2 times 1/2 is going to be challenging as an example. You want to be able to convey which fraction you represent first in this area model representation. And then I've already set this up so that it's linked to the University of Michigan Field Observation Framework, and I can just click and say that it's about our high-level teaching practice of explaining core content.
Sammy wants to know how much of a total pan of brownies she will be buying. She wonders, what is 1/2 of 1/2? Another way that
Okay, so at this point I could leave another comment. I could say a strength at this point is that she has marked on the paper the problem that they're going to be working on together. wrote, it was useful that you recorded the problem that you will be solving.
We can think about this is 1/2 times 1/2. So of the whole brownie pan, so this is the brownie pan, it is 1/2 full. So that's what we're shading.
So at this point, I could leave another comment about, like, consider narrating how you were dividing the brownie pan. In this case, the rectangle, and I'll put rectangle in parentheses.
But she only wants to buy 1/2 of it. Or she wants to buy 1/2 of this. So this is the
Okay, so that's another point that I might leave a comment. I'm not actually gonna record it at this point, but I could leave a comment about, it's quite useful right now that she's marking that you're taking 1/2 of the part that's shaded in this particular example. I probably could also leave a comment saying that it might be useful if you actually do some tracing with your finger or you outline it with a marker. So there's additional work that she could be doing in this particular context.
whole pan of brownies, and she sees it, and it's 1/2 full. From the part that's shaded, she only wants 1/2 of it. So then we can take the shaded part and divide it into 2 equal parts.
I could leave a comment there about her use of the word equal.
And we want 1 of those parts. So we're gonna shade just 1 of those parts. Now we can see what fraction of the whole pan she's buying. So from what we have right now, the pan is not divided into equal parts. Once we divide it into equal parts, we can see that there are 4 equal parts, and she's only buying 1/4 of the whole pan of brownies.
So there are other comments that I could leave on that, and I'll let you to continue on your own to think about what those comments could be, but I think this gives you a sense of what this actually looks like. What?
Show down below.
Oh,
So there's the comments that Megan left. If you wanted to, you could click on like
Yeah.
the one at 27
Think
seconds. It
about
would take
this.
right
Think about
to right
this.
that place in the video.
And if one of my teaching interns had a question about one of my comments, they could hit the reply button and they could leave a question about that, which would then prompt me to go back in and look at the video again and respond to their particular comment. Okay, so to kind of give you a quick wrap-up of this particular example. So using this video component, we sometimes refer to this as a video enhanced lesson plan. It allowed for the feedback to be focused on more core aspects of the practice because we were able to actually see more of what the person was planning to do in the practice with actual children. A second thing is that it was actually quite efficient for me as a course instructor. It was much more efficient for me to do this than it was for me to read through their lengthy lesson plans and to provide written comments on those and hope that I was interpreting what they were saying in the lesson plans correctly about what they were going to go off and do. At the same time, we also thought that this was more productive for intern practice and preparation because the time that they were spending watching the videos, in some cases they actually did shoot the video multiple times before they submitted it. It was actually good preparation for the work they would end up going off and doing with children. So actually in the context of making that video, they were doing walkthroughs of the work that they were actually going to be doing with children. So that actually served as preparation time for them rather than time spent producing some sort of representation just for their course instructor. With that, I'm going to turn things over to Mary for a second example.
Thank you. So in my role as clinical experiences coordinator, one of the things that we really care about, as well as course instructors care about, is marshaling feedback in support of student teachers. So throughout our program, interns are placed in classrooms. They have a field placement every semester they're in the program. But one of the things, oh, it's on that small view. Can you fix it? Sorry. I can't read it from there. Sorry. Yep. The technology always gets me. Thank you. Yep. One of the things that we care about is helping interns make it to the student teaching semester with lots of feedback along the way to help them hone their practices so that when they get to that everyday, all-day semester, they're ready for the next step of work. Before we had Athena, that meant field instructors and mentor teachers being on site all the time with our student teachers to help provide that feedback in the moment. Also ensuring that student teachers were ready to assume that next step of responsibility for being well-started beginning teachers in their own classroom. So it's at high stakes last semester. We asked field instructors to be there to watch student teachers, teaching interns live at least once a week, often more than that. And speaking as a former field instructor, often at various times of the week, trying to schedule multiple interns. So the complexity is there, and it's difficult to manage the time. Also providing feedback through written comments often. So a lot of writing, a lot of emails, but not in the moment, or also not in close proximity sometimes to the actual teaching itself. So clearly, we had a lot of challenges we were facing with that old model. Being present in the classroom, losing the teaching once it's gone, without the video record, without the evidence, teaching evaporates after it's done. And without having the teaching interns have access to their own teaching to go back and reflect on, because we know that in the moment, novices are thinking about a lot of things. And so we want them to be able to go back and look at their teaching again. And also, we know that there was inadequate space for conversations across mentor teachers, field instructors, and clinical experiences coordinators when needed because of the constraints of elementary school, which is the place that I work. So I'm going to tell a little story about how Edthena changed that for us. I'm going to give you a particular scenario about a student teacher and a mentor teacher who called and said to me, I have a student teacher who I'm not sure is quite ready, and we have 2 weeks left to help support her around classroom management. I'm having some real concerns, and so I need you and the field instructor to be here every day for the next 2 weeks. Right? It happens. And I say kindly, well, I would love to do that, and I'm sure the field instructor would too. I think we have other ways that we could work on this collaboratively, and to be able to show you and the teaching intern that indeed she will be ready to be a well-started beginning teacher. So we asked the teaching intern to post videos of her lessons, every lesson starting that day for the final 2 weeks, so that we could all share in her practice and focus on the practices that the mentor teacher had identified as the ones that she really needed to work on. So you can see in the corner, as Adam so nicely said earlier, you can be identified on Athena by a picture of yourself, or if you don't like to show yourself, you can choose a picture and be identified by an heirloom tomato or a girl riding a bike. But each one of those circles identifies one of the people who are in this special group that I created on Athena, particularly for this purpose of supporting this teaching intern. So those circles represent myself, the clinical experiences coordinator, the field instructor, the mentor teacher, and the teaching intern. So next, we asked the intern, as I said, to post these videos shortly after teaching. Sometimes she would post them at lunch, from the morning, and then at the end of the day. I could look in multiple times a day and comment. The field instructor also, who was there at certain times, but also could look in off-site and comment. And the teaching intern could respond to those comments. We also, I do want to say, we changed the look of Athena a little bit here just to show you the roles of the people. It wouldn't normally say field instructor or pre-service teacher, but we wanted to make it identifiable to you to see the different roles of the people engaging in this conversation. So you can see that the conversation is a coordinated conversation. It's not a one-off conversation where you're just getting one piece of feedback from one person, but it is a dialogue between the key constituents in this conversation to help support this student teacher, and allows them to share their language and expertise with one another, all focused on the support of the teaching intern. And the teaching intern is also able to engage in the conversation and read through the comments, ask questions, and then at the end, summarize the thoughts, summarize what she heard, and talk about what her next steps for going forward are in a way that allows her to be actively involved in her own learning. So it's pretty clear the benefits of this innovation for us is having this routine presence, the ability to have a routine presence in a very focused way, As long as the videos are uploaded, everyone in that instructional team can be a part of the conversation in supporting that teaching intern. It also allows us to capture that teaching and make it tangible evidence so that at the end we could say to the mentor teacher, look back on the day when we started and look where she's at now. Watch the practice change over time. See how her language changed. See how she was able to manage the classroom in a different way based on the very careful feedback that she was getting in this targeted period of time. We wouldn't have been able to do that before. It also gave her access to her own teaching to be able to feel good about, you can imagine at the beginning of the process, she was feeling a little bit like, am I going to be okay? Am I going to make it? Being able to watch her teaching back over the weeks, she could see her own growth and feel good about the place where she was when she left. It also allowed for this wonderful, flexible space of coordinated dialogue. I can't say again how important that piece is. Often when I was a field instructor before and in my work, it would feel like my comments were given in isolation, but through Edthena and through commenting on the videos, we were able to have off-site conversations back and forth, very carefully based around the practices that we were looking for. Now I'm going to talk about another innovation that we've used, and we've used this across courses and in the field. So I'm going to talk a little bit about supporting the learning of those that are supporting learning. And in my case, I'm going to talk about the professional development of field instructors, and then Megan's going to say a little bit about course instructors. So before we had Athena, when I was working with field instructors to try to work on a practice or learn something new, like a new field evaluation tool, it would be about presenting information and sharing stories with them, basically telling them what we were going to be doing. So we were trying to support the growth and the knowledge and skills of new field instructors as they come and go in and out of our program, and to try to launch new parts of our program as we developed new parts of our elementary work. So we would be sharing documents with them, we would be sharing new field evaluation tools, but basically it would be a telling of them. So we would not be co-creating at this point. It would basically be me generating a meeting with field instructors to try to give them some new information that I was hoping that they would then take out into the field and use with teaching interns and mentor teachers. The challenge about this was it was an inadequate portrayal of practice. We didn't have good ways of representing the work other than through anecdotes and stories and one-offs. And also it felt very uncomfortable being someone who respects and honors, and our program embraces field instructors as a part of our instructional team, that we were basically making them recipients of information rather than making them actively involved and engaged in the process of learning something new or taking on a development of a new tool. And during those meetings, we had a lack of common and shared experiences around teaching. We didn't have any way of actually sharing the practice we were talking about. We were often just talking over the top of it. And then came Athena. And so I'm going to tell a little story about how this changed the way that field instructor meetings and professional development with field instructors now works in our program. So with the use of Athena, because we do have now records of practice, videos, along with the artifacts that go with them, teaching plans, student work, I can go in as the field experiences coordinator and plan a professional development meeting based on a topic that I want to work on with field instructors, and I can look through the catalog of videos that we have, and I can easily search for things that I am looking for to work on, just like Megan showed you, by looking for a particular high leverage practice that a field instructor has marked on a video. So we're going to have a professional development meeting, and we're going to work on the first 4 high leverage practices, because we're going to have a new field observation tool, field evaluation tool. So in this meeting, I want field instructors to talk about these 4 high leverage practices, but I want to talk about them in relationship to watching a teaching intern teaching. And so I can easily find a video now that does that to show, and you can see in this particular clip, where a field instructor, potentially who's in that group, may have already marked that video with those high leverage practices so that we can go back, watch it, We can even read her comments and have her talk about what she saw in the video in relationship to those high leverage practices, and then talk as a group about those practices and how they might then go out in the field and use that. We can even drill down into looking at one high leverage practice very carefully. For example, number 4, leading a class discussion of content, and talk about what are the pieces within that high leverage practice, and then watch the video. And we can talk about what did you see, which pieces of that high leverage practice did you see, and talk about it as a group. And then, because our new field evaluation tool has levels, we can have a discussion about what level is that high leverage practice at in that teaching interns practice at this moment in time. Is that a meets expectation? Is that an area of strength? And why? Let's talk about it as a group of expert teachers who are field instructors and going to go out into the field and use this observation tool, this evaluation tool, with teaching interns and mentor teachers, who they then will need to talk about this tool with. And then there's a place for comments so that they can also write down the evidence that they see from that video. And then when they leave comments there, those comments as well become another tool for us to use in professional development in our meetings with field instructors to talk about what kind of comments do you write to a teaching intern and leave for them as residue of that work. And how do we build a common practice around that? So you can see there are clear benefits from this innovation that are exciting for me and for our program. We now have rich portrayals of practice that are right from our teaching interns' work and from the work of instructors. We also have a common text. We have a way of sharing these practices in professional development meetings that we have regularly. We can watch together, we can look at the artifacts from that teaching together, and we can discuss them to build a common understanding. It is a great opportunity to be talking in an evidence-based way rather than talking over the top of teaching or just talking about stories or what we saw in one instance. But we really now have evidence to draw from in the way that we talk about our teaching. And it also is a way for them to talk with the interns and mentors in an evidence-based way so that they're very much being connected to the practices that they see. And then we are collectively forging the change, which is a really comfortable place for me because now the field instructor's expertise is being recognized in that conversation. It is professional development that's built from within as we share the practices together. And also, finally, not a small thing, for me as the clinical experiences coordinator, my ability to arrange professional development sessions for field instructors is so greatly enhanced because now I have an accessible, reliable source and an easy source to tap into of current videos and pieces of teaching from our interns who are in our program right now, who are working with our field instructors right now, that I can easily find, whereas before at Athena, hundreds and hundreds of kind of unnamed, untagged videos, and I had to search for what I was looking for. Now I can easily find that. So great enhancements to our program. Megan, do you want to say
Yeah,
something?
so I've used Edthena in a similar way in the context of working with graduate students who are preparing to teach a math methods course. And so one of the ways I've made use of Edthena when working with such graduate students is a big piece of the work that we have to do together is learning how to watch teaching intern practice and give feedback on that practice. And so what I'll typically do in the context of a math methods course is, as assignments are being submitted, my teaching interns typically, for example, lead math discussions in their field placements as they submit their math discussions. I will have graduate students working with me go and watch those math discussions as they're uploaded and think about the feedback that they would give to that particular teaching intern and just keep track of that feedback like in a Word document. And then what they can do is a couple of days later, after I've actually provided the feedback to that particular teaching intern, they can see the feedback that I provided to that teaching intern and think about, for example, the phrasing of that feedback. So one challenge often for novice teacher educators is figuring out how to actually give the feedback. So you notice something about the practice, but how do you actually frame that comment back to someone? And then we can have conversations together about what they noticed, what I ended up commenting on, additional things that could have been commented on, but I made a decision not to. We can think about the phrasing of the language, etc. So it's been quite useful for the preparation of teacher educators as well.
So, just to say a little bit about where these innovations came from. I think the 3 examples that we've heard about so far are examples of where there's a problem of practice and you try to think about how you could solve that problem of practice in your teacher education approach, in this case through the use of video. And so we heard first from Megan, and she was talking about the complexity and the invisibility of some of the practices that she was trying to get the interns to be learning. She's trying to have them show what they were thinking, what they were doing in their plan, but really the limitations of a written out plan as opposed to having a video example. So hence the innovation of the video enhanced lesson plan. If anybody has a better idea for the name of that, we'd love to hear that. And we just sort of came up with that. It just rolls off the tongue. So then Mary shared a couple examples. One where you're trying to sort of flexibly and quickly and efficiently organize collective feedback to really support an intern who might be encountering difficulty, might be at a particular juncture where you really need to be marshaling resources in a way that are really going to help move that intern forward quickly. And Edthena provides the flexibility and the tools to allow us to do that, where you could just say, snap of a finger, make a group, 4 people are in it, upload your video. And that intern had been uploading videos and making comments and doing that thing across her whole career, you know, with us in the School of Education. So it wasn't like I got to learn a new technology. I had to figure out how I'm going to share it with people. It was all sort of she was able to capitalize on that accumulation of knowledge over time. And then the third example that we had was this professional development of instructors, whether they be course instructors, new graduate students, field instructors, and how we can use Athena as a tool for supporting that development. And so this video-supported discussions, tuning meaning here, the video-supported tuning discussions, where you're either working with the graduate students or the field instructors, where you're increasingly making the feedback that you're saying and its connection to the high leverage practices an object of focus. And you're saying, now what did you mean when you said that? Or let's think about how we're saying that. How could we fine tune it a little bit so it communicates better, so it's easier for us to write, so the intern might recognize or understand the feedback that we're giving a little bit better. So those are 3 examples of this problem leading to an innovation that was supported through the flexibility and the array of tools that are within Athena. I want to give you a chance to talk with each other, and what I want you to think about with each other for just a couple minutes here is think about the connection between a problem of practice you may have in a course that you're teaching, and think about how could video be of use in working on that problem. And maybe you'll pick one where you think it might have some potential. Talk with each other a little bit about what you might be able to do with video to address that problem. And then we'll come back together and I'll share a couple other examples and we'll take your questions. So please talk with each other a little bit about a problem of practice and how video might help with that. All right, thank you. So as I was walking around, I heard lots of interesting ideas about problems of practice and ways in which video might be leveraged to be engaging with those problems. It seems we have lots of problems, so I'll share a couple other ones just sort of off the cuff, a snapshot. So one of the things that can be a problem is building community among interns and having the interns or teacher candidates or whatever word you use to refer to those folks. Talking with each other, being resources for each other, not just when they're in the classroom but outside the classroom. And so we've had interns making their own groups. So we teach them, we say, here's how to make a group. Feel free to make a group. If you want feedback from your mentor teacher, make a group. Put your video in there, include your mentor teacher, and you can go back and forth on videos with your mentor teacher. One thing that's been happening with interns that we've been noticing over these last couple of years is they've been making groups with each other. So in one case, we have a pretty specialized field setting where they're sort of sharing the teaching of some kids. And the problem they were experiencing was, I don't know where you left off with Joe, and I'm gonna have him tomorrow, and I don't have time to catch up with you, and if I did, the amount we'd have to say might not really help me to think about what I'm supposed to do tomorrow. So they made these groups, and they gave really good names like Team Awesome. And in those groups, they would post videos of themselves teaching, not for the pure purpose of getting feedback on their teaching, but so that their colleagues could see where the kids were in that particular idea, so that the next day or the next week or whatever the next teaching time, they could pick up on it. They use the platform in ways probably even Adam hasn't imagined. So they did that. They did the thing like we showed you, the kind of meat and potatoes, show a video, give me some feedback on it. How did you think I did with this? But they also were like shooting videos of the lectures or the class periods. So they posted it in the Team Awesome group, and then they could go back and replay it and think about what was happening in that one, mark points of time that they thought were important or about a particular idea that they wanted to remember to go back to. So it's been neat to see that their appropriation or their use of this for their own purposes to meet their needs. And then I guess about as far away from that as you could get, we also have program needs where we're trying to think about how as a program we can be learning either in a formative or a summative way about our interns. Actually, this one, that's the next one, see? Sorry. This one is actually, we have a set of performance assessments that are a part of the program, multimedia. And we used to go through this whole circus of how we would collect the videos and how would we get them scored and how would we get the feedback back to people. It was really something else. And so with Athena being a sort of a common part of our program, interns are able to pull videos that they made for other classes and say, oh, I can use that for this performance assessment because it shows me giving directions and the students responding to those directions. It might have been for a literacy assignment that I had like 6 months ago, but it will work for this one. I'll be able to reshare it to this particular group for this assessment. I'll be able to put new comments on it, and I'll be able to get feedback from people who are scoring that. And then we're also, because of the flexibility of the grouping within Athena, we're also able to make groups where people who are learning how to score it can pull a couple of those examples, sit down, have a person who's experienced with the scoring of it say, do like a think aloud. Here's what I'm thinking as I'm watching this video, typing the comments at particular points in the performance, and then have an opportunity for scorers to be learning from each other and getting better at that so that they're ready as a team to give good feedback and to provide good data for the program. This one that I was referring to earlier, as a program, we have this a need for data, for thinking formatively and summatively about our interns. And you'll see here that the arrow is red because we are still thinking about this, and we took this particular problem to Adam and his colleagues there. We were trying to think about how could we capitalize on our use of Athena and still be able to, and also be able to, provide scores to interns, think about how those scores add up in your course or across the program. And so I guess we set the challenge, and Adam and his colleagues were able to figure out some really neat features of Athena that just came into play last year, which were being able to choose particular standards, make leveled indicators where you're able to say where they're at on a 4-point scale with respect to those standards, be able to write in comments in the comments section, so that the intern be able to indicate to the intern, you're at the beginning of the program here. This is where I think you're gonna end up being on this. Over time, you're gonna get progressively better, but this is the expectation we have at this time. And instructor's able to mark where the person's performance actually is along that scale and provide a comment. And then not only that, but you're able to take those individual experiences now and say, what's happening as a class? So now that I've scored those 30 videos using those leveled indicators, how do they do at particular points in time with that particular practice? So you have the practice up here, you see the levels of proficiency here that's key to a scale up here. We're able to have instructors see those things as well as folks in the program be able to see those things to figure out how are interns doing with respect to those particular practices. What could we do to support instructors more in order to enhance their experiences? So these innovations that we've been sharing with you, I think we tried as hard as we could to say, we don't think we know it all. We basically are confronting some issues within our practice and trying to think of a way that we could address those practices. I hope you've heard some ideas that you can walk away with to think about your own problems of practice and ways in which you might be able to use video or a video platform such as Athena to be working on those with each other as colleagues to improve over time. So at this point, I'll just say thanks for listening to our talk here and to ask you if you have any questions. Yes?
So if an intern, pre-service teacher, candidate, someone videotapes themselves, uploads that is now Athena's content?
No, it's it's in Edthena as a platform. So when it goes in there, the intern says, I want it to just be mine, and nobody can watch it. Or I want my coaches just to see it, or I'm going to share it with everyone in this group. So there's levels of sharing that happen with respect to any of those videos, but those videos are there. They don't become the property of Edthena.
Can they access them after their subscription? Like after they graduate our credential program, can they go back and access those?
They can download them back.
Okay,
Yeah, they wouldn't be able to like keep them in perpetually for storage,
right.
but yeah.
Thank you.
Yep. Other questions? Yes.
About how long does it take for a program to get started working with their faculty to get used to using a program like this?
That's a good question. I think I almost want to say like results may vary, but you probably do that. So for us, in the presentation that I was referring to before this, becoming a program that uses video, we spent probably 2 or 3 years with like setting up a hard drive in the back of a room and having interns with flash drives come back, put it on the hard drive, and then the instructor would schlep the hard drive home and then like try to play them or put them all on her computer and use up all the space on her computer, let alone the security, let alone all the other like, oh boy, I can't believe they did that. So I think for us, we've had a buy-in for the power of video, and that video could really make us more effective in promoting a practice-based approach to teacher education. And our faculty had experienced enough of the problems of the old ways that they were hungry for something different. So you might think at your institution about how many people are already working with these things, and you can already imagine, and you probably have heard from them, the struggles that they have with whichever approach that they've been using. And I think we've found that having a common platform, being able to work collectively on that, gives you a lot more resources for fine-tuning and improving the use of video over time, instead of people individually figuring out their own way. So, I mean, and we've grown as Edthena has grown in many ways. So we shared innovations here, but I don't know, how long have we been using Athena? 3 years, 4 years? Oh, 5 years. So it has taken a while, but we have put in place structures for supporting new faculty to be learning. So every semester we have a What's New with Edthena session. And Athena also has lots of background information, frequently asked questions, and really, this is the thing our interns like a lot, a really solid support structure. So if they are encountering, if they're one of the 1%, and they have some kind of problem, they can send a question to Edthena, and often they'll get a response within a day. And the thing that's great is they're on the West Coast, and we're on East Coast time, so sometimes you can get that answer before the next day because they're still working at it.
They'll often like send the course instructor an email message like close to midnight saying, I'm having a problem and I'm going to contact Athena. And then you'll see them the next morning at 9 a.m. and they will say, oh, already heard back from Athena.
Yeah.